Okay, let's dive in.
Let's do it.
Today we're exploring a single, really fascinating source. It's a deep dive into the life story of Namu, the killer whale.
Hmm.
And our mission really is to unpack his whole journey, from that accidental capture
Right.
to becoming the world's very first performing orca. And, understand his incredibly complex legacy.
Yeah, it's complex because it profoundly shifted how humans saw orcas, but it also, maybe unintentionally, helped kickstart a whole controversial industry.
Exactly. It's a story just packed with surprising turns and some real insights, I think.
What's really striking about this account, for me, is how this one whale's life just became such a pivotal moment. It's like there's a before Namu and an after Namu for how people viewed and, well, interacted with orcas.
Absolutely. So let's start with the basics. Who was this whale?
Okay.
Our source tells us Namu was a male northern resident killer whale, estimated maybe 17 years old when he died.
Yeah, and part of the C1 pod, his mother was known as C5 or Quatna.
Right.
And just to add a bit of context there, from the source mentioning his pod, his mother, even a podmate, C15, it really underlines the social structure. Northern residents, they live in these tight-knit family units, matriarchal pods,
Yeah.
often together for life. So it highlights that Namu came from this really connected social world.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
And visually, the source describes him as, well, pretty memorable, around 24 feet long.
Big animal.
Huge, with a tall dorsal fin that kind of leaned to the left, and large pectoral fins and apparently blue eyes, which seems notable.
Yeah, quite distinctive. That description definitely helps bring him to life from the page.
Now, the capture story, as the source describes it, it's remarkable and maybe, like you said, insightful. It happened accidentally June 23rd, 1965.
Yeah, near Namu, British Columbia, which is, of course, where he got his name.
Right. He and that younger podmate, C15, they got tangled in a fisherman's gill net.
Which is basically, a wall of netting.
Right.
Meant for fish, obviously, but...
But big enough to trap these two whales.
Exactly.
And here's where the source gets really interesting. Namu reportedly managed to get out.
He did.
Yeah, slipped out between the rocks and the net. But instead of just swimming off, the account suggests he seemed to be, well, showing C15 how to escape, too.
Huh. That really raises questions, doesn't it? About their behavior, their social bonds, maybe?
Wait, totally. According to the source, Namu gets free, but then comes back because C15 is still stuck.
And C15.
Well, 2 days later, C15 was gone. The source doesn't actually say how, but Namu, he was still trapped.
Wow. So he stayed.
He stayed. And the source really highlights this behavior escaping, then returning as potentially offering this glimpse into maybe orca intelligence or their social nature, like a strong bond or concern for the younger whale.
And you can see how that specific detail, Namu returning, would immediately shape how people saw him, right? It sets the stage.
Definitely. So the fishermen, now with this trapped whale, they contacted Ted Griffin. He owned the Seattle Aquarium. And the source makes it pretty clear Griffin had this long-standing, almost like a personal fascination.
Yeah, an obsession almost.
Kind of, with capturing and taming a large whale or dolphin, specifically one he could actually ride.
His motivation, as it's presented, seems really unique, driven by this very specific, ambitious goal.
Yeah. So Griffin bought Namu,
Yeah.
paid $8,000.
Which is probably a lot of money back then.
I imagine so. And then came the really astounding part, getting him to Seattle.
No transport, yeah.
He built this floating sea pen, right? And then towed it behind his tugboat for, get this, 450 miles down the coast.
That's hard to even picture. Just the logistics, like you said earlier, moving an animal that size, that distance, in basically a floating cage behind a small boat, it was, well, an immense undertaking.
Sounds absolutely unbelievable. And the arrival in Seattle, this was July 1965, it was a massive deal.
Oh, yeah.
The source paints this vivid picture. Elliott Bay crammed with small boats, planes circling overhead, crowds lining the waterfront.
Wow.
All just to see this one whale arrive.
So he landed to immediate, intense public fascination. He had a pen waiting, built just for him.
Right there at the aquarium.
And the crowds, right away, seeing this, nearly 8,000-pound whale, it must have been huge. An instant celebrity.
The source is clear. Yeah, he was an immediate sensation. And Ted Griffin's dream.
Riding the whale.
He did it almost immediately. He was riding Namu shortly after arrival. And he described their connection as a feeling of kinship.
That personal bond is such a key part of this narrative. The source notes, importantly, that despite being in the water with this incredibly powerful animal, Namu never harmed Griffin.
Never. Their interactions went beyond just riding, too. They performed waterworks for the crowds. Namu apparently recognized Griffin, even in big crowds, followed commands, even mimicked sounds.
Mimicked sounds, like human sounds.
Yeah, that's what the source suggests. And seemed to enjoy spending hours just in company.
And these specific behaviors, the recognition, following commands, the mimicry, just being comfortable with people, these are the details the source uses to show Namu's intelligence, his gentle nature, the things that really captivated the public.
Exactly. And this is where Namu had his most immediate and maybe most profound impact. The source really emphasizes that his intelligence, his friendliness, it utterly transformed public attitudes towards orcas.
It really was a complete turnaround, wasn't it? Before Namu, the general view was, well, killer whale, murderous predators.
Right.
And Namu, just through these interactions described in the source, he showed people a totally different side, a kind, gentle animal. I mean, the idea that someone could even swim with an orca was widely disbelieved.
And Namu just proved it was possible, simply by being himself, interacting the way he did.
Yeah, that massive shift in perception, all triggered by one individual whale. That's a powerful part of this story.
Yeah, it really is. But Namu's huge popularity also had these unforeseen and, well, darker consequences.
Right. The crowds kept coming, Hollywood noticed.
He starred in a movie, didn't he? Namu the Killer Whale.
Yeah, they filmed the outdoor scenes near Bremerton, Washington.
And here's the twist. The source points out that Namu's success, his popularity, it directly inspired Ted Griffin to, well, expand his operation.
Get into the business more seriously.
Exactly. Capturing and selling more orcas to other aquariums like SeaWorld.
And this is that complexity of Namu's legacy, right? Yeah. Laid bare in the source. His life was so instrumental in changing human views for the better. Yet his fame inadvertently fueled this capture industry that led to, suffering and death for many other wild orcas. And the source includes that really heart-wrenching detail.
Oh, the vocalization.
Yeah, Namu would apparently call out when he was alone in his pen, and sometimes wild orca pods passing through Puget Sound, they'd call back.
Ugh, that just, hearing him call out to potentially his family, his pod.
Yeah.
It's incredibly sad.
It really is. And the source then brings in the story of Shamu, which serves as this really stark contrast to Namu's sort of accidental capture.
Yeah, it's a very different story.
The source describes the capture of a calf and her mother, October 31st or maybe November 1st, 1965. Griffin's team spotted them in Puget Sound.
And the method described is, well, it's rough. The mother was shot with a light harpoon.
Attached to a buoy, yeah.
And then they were chased for over 17 hours, apparently, before finally being netted in Henderson Bay.
Just relentless. And the source recounts that shortly after being caught, the mother started swimming erratically, bubbles coming from the harpoon wound.
Oh, no.
She drowned, tragically. And that violent, fatal outcome, it's such a sharp contrast to Namu just getting tangled in a fishing net and surviving.
It really is. So the calf, who would become Shamu, she was moved to Namu's winter pen.
But they didn't get along.
Not at all. According to the source, it says Namu and the calf just didn't like each other. Shamu was described as rough, hard to train.
Interesting. And then she was sold off pretty quickly.
Yeah, sold to SeaWorld for $75,000. Big money. And SeaWorld couldn't use the name Namu, copyright issues, so they called her Shamu.
Which apparently meant friend of Namu or she-Namu. Kind of ironic given they didn't get along.
Very ironic. She was flown to SeaWorld San Diego in December '65.
So that whole narrative of Shamu's capture, her temperament, it really does create this dramatic counterpoint, doesn't it?
Absolutely. The friendly accidental capture versus the violently captured, difficult one. Sadly, Namu's own story. It also ended tragically. And way too soon.
Yeah, the source states he died on July 9th, 1966, less than a year after Shamu arrived.
And the cause?
Severe colic, which is intense abdominal pain that followed an infection.
And the source is specific about the infection source, right?
It is Clostridium perfringens bacteria, and it notes this bacteria came from the polluted water in his pen. Elliott Bay, even back then, wasn't pristine.
So his death is directly linked back to the conditions of captivity, the very environment he was kept in.
Essentially, yes, that's what the source implies. It mentions Ted Griffin did capture more orcas after Namu, but he never found another one quite like him.
Yeah, Namu's personality, as it comes across in the source, that gentleness, the willingness to interact, the intelligence shown by recognizing people, following commands, it clearly made him unique, both in Griffin's experience and in the public's eyes.
Which brings us right back to that complex legacy. The source highlights his firsts, First, captive killer whale to survive more than just a few months.
Big milestone back then.
Huge.
Yeah.
And the first to actually perform with humans, for humans.
And like we talked about, that incredible impact on perception, changing the view from menacing killer to gentle, friendly animal, proving swimming with an orca wasn't just possible, but something people actually wanted to see.
The source doesn't ignore the flip side. His immense success, the public's fascination. It directly inspired the capture of many, many more wild orcas for shows, SeaWorld, Marineland, others, fueling an industry that we now know came with significant welfare concerns.
His story, as the source lays it out, it really is that duality, isn't it? The positive shift in how humans saw these amazing animals running right alongside the tragic consequences for the wild population, driven by the industry his fame helped ignite. It's a lot to take in.
It really is. Namu's story, where one single animal's life so profoundly changed human views and simultaneously spurred an industry that affected countless others. It really makes you think, doesn't it, about the unintended consequences when humans interact with the natural world. What does Namu's story make you think about those ripple effects?